Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody. Today we are taking a trip out of the United States and we're heading up to Canada, which is actually, the way things are going in the United States, a good thing. We are speaking with Nolan Matthias. Welcome, Nolan.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Nolan is the founder of a company by the name of Mortgage 360, and I'm fascinated by the Canadian system versus the American system. I have a friend from Canada. He's always telling us how dumb and arcane the American system is, and I wanted to get the perspective of a Canadian. So here we are, and not only that, but Nolan does a broadcast of the world of economic conditions, and we certainly have some breaking news on that front with the longshoremen strike in the United States, among other issues. So first, Nolan, tell us a little bit about Mortgage 360.
Yeah, so we've got a great little company. I was telling you prior to recording here that we do with 5 people what most companies in our space do with 50 to 70. We're the first B Corp certified mortgage company in North America. So B Corp certification is a certification around social accountability, and we're we're a company that we use business as a force for good. That thrive and give thing, there's no mistake to that being there. Long time ago, I lost my why. I got caught up in the typical mortgage business stuff, which your value is all placed on how much volume you do and how much money you make and what you can do for lenders. And we kind of flipped it on its head, and we made it about information and trust and accountability and making sure that people have the best possible information that they have. And as a result, we're able to do more for more people and really help as many people make the biggest financial decision of their lives.
You're preaching to the choir on that one. I love it. Accountability, trust, philanthropy, giving back, being grateful for what you have versus what other people may not have. We don't have the same type of system. In Canada, you had to become a certified B Corp. You had to go through a process.
Well, B Corp is actually an American organization, and it's a worldwide organization. It's the same certification that companies like Patagonia have, companies like Ben and Jerry's. In fact, Patagonia a few years ago, they came out and said that they weren't going to allow the stock market bros on Wall Street to wear their Patagonia stuff anymore and have their logos on it unless they were actually a certified B Corp. So
Really?
it's actually something that's not Canadian. It's a movement around business being a force for good.
That's great. So tell me a little bit how your giving goes. How do you give back? Who do you give back to? What's the process and what's the driving force? What do you do?
Yeah, so I mean, let me start with the driving force. If it's okay with you, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about that and how we ended up there. Basically, in 2012, I got completely burnt out on doing mortgages. By around 2009, I was probably one of the most successful mortgage brokers in the country, and definitely the youngest, and set a bunch of records. Got invited to be a partner in a company that nobody had ever been invited to be a partner in that company at the age that I was at when I was invited. And really, it was just, I got to 2012, I got burnt out. I ended up going and doing a turnaround on a real estate company just because I thought it was interesting and it was different than what I was actually doing in the mortgage space, and really just kind of lost track of why I had dreamed of being a business person. And I ended up going out for lunch with a buddy who runs a really successful company that is actually in the US now as well. And he's like, you got to go read this book. So he tells me the title. It's Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I left the lunch, and by 1 p.m. I had this book in my hand, and I started reading it, and I read it straight through, basically an 8-hour stretch of reading it, because I'm a mortgage broker, lender. I'm kind of dumb, so it takes me a little bit longer to read stuff. And I read this thing, and I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. And Simon Sinek had this little course that you could buy that was like $139 to develop your why statement. So I'm like, well, I'll go and spend $139 on that. And I went and I did the course. I basically was up till 5 a.m. And at the end of it, I had this beautiful why statement. It was to inspire people to thrive and give. And when I looked at it, I was like, man, that seems familiar. And when I'd kind of been about halfway through university, I had a mentor who'd given me a journal, and he had written in the journal, uh, first page was vision, second page was mission. And on that mission page, I opened it back up, and literally the mission statement was something to the effect of to help people thrive or be successful financially so that they could give back beyond what they ever thought possible. I looked
That
at it
was
and I went,
that was your
holy,
mission statement?
that was my mission statement at basically 20 years old. And this is at almost 30 years old. I'm looking at the mission statement and my new why statement. I'm going, they're exactly the same. And sometime in the middle of that, I lost complete track of the reason why I was doing what I was doing. I always thought, coming out of university with an economics degree, I'd be an investment banker or something like that. I ended up being a mortgage broker just because, well, there's a story about swearing at an instructor about how I became a mortgage broker. But basically, I thought I'd become an investment banker, ended up in the mortgage industry, helping people make the biggest financial decision of their life. And somewhere in the middle of that, I lost track of why I was doing it. And when I realized why I was doing it, I was basically able to come back to the real foundation of what my purpose was. And as a result, we were able to take the company, Mortgage 360, that was a great company, and make it 1,000 times better, and really detach ourselves from the outcome of that next deal, that next commission, and all the things that make, realtors, mortgage brokers, title people do the things that they probably wouldn't otherwise do, just because the industry trains us to do things in that particular way.
It's interesting. You do get caught up on a hamster wheel. When I got out of business school, I was a bond analyst, a bond trader, and you're moving, and then I was an equity trader, and you're basically moving paper from one place to another for money.
Mhm.
You're not adding anything to the environment. You're not adding anything to the quality of life for people or to society. But
Totally.
you do get caught up in the money,
Hmm.
and it's a horrible demon because I once went to a psychiatrist, actually a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, but what he said was there's a lot of people around here who think that when they make a lot of money they're going to be happy, and then they make a lot of money and they're still not happy. So what do you do then? And you came to your epiphany, and it's phenomenal. That's great. It's really, I always tell my kids, to be grateful, to look at those less fortunate instead of always looking up at those who you want what they have. Because material things, you know what? They come and they go. But
For sure. For sure.
relationships and doing good, your tagline is 100% right. So now tell me, I believe what you do is you give a piece of your income on every mortgage, and the
Mhm.
people who took the mortgage can direct where they want to put it.
Yeah. So there's been a couple of iterations of it. There was, in fact, a time when we started that in 2014 where we had a specific charity. They were called, I'm assuming they're still around. I'm not even sure if they're actually still around, but it was an organization called Meal Share. So we were doing 100 meals for every mortgage that we did. Then we iterated on that, and we started doing a charity where they could assign where they wanted the money to go. And that was interesting.
Hmm.
But it didn't actually work that really that well. And there were some mechanics as to why it didn't work that well. So eventually what we did is we just shifted to giving a certain percentage of our bottom line and using it in the community. And sometimes that means charity, sometimes it means giving it to people in need, but we direct it now. And the reason why we direct it is simply because it turns out that when somebody's getting a mortgage, the last thing they're thinking about is where they want money to be directed.
That's
It
interesting.
actually,
Only because most people, I raise money for a charity.
mhm.
And what you run up against is that everyone's got something that they're very passionate about. So even if you're getting a mortgage, you would think that people would still have something that they were passionate about, but I
Yeah.
guess not. So some people for didn't take the money, didn't direct you how to donate it.
It wasn't that it wasn't that they didn't direct it. Some of them did, but some of them just didn't know where they wanted it to go. So you'd be surprised how many people are passionate about different organizations, but don't have one that is really aligned to them. Like myself, for example, I don't have a charity that I'm highly aligned to, but when I see somebody who's passionate about a cause, I'll support them in their cause. But my I would say diabetes is one that probably hits closer to home than pretty much anything else. But there's so many organizations out there that really do amazing things. And then for us, where we look is we look to see where we can make the biggest impact. So instead of just
And
going, okay, well, United Way is cool or this organization's cool or whatever, it's like, where's the dollar actually going to get used most effectively? And we're kind of at the point now where it's like, I don't really need a tax receipt. If I see somebody who is in need, I'd rather give them the money and avoid and not have the tax receipt than get the tax receipt just so it's better from a tax perspective for us.
of course. So
Yeah.
what you said is 100% right. So I pitch my charity. We're $1 million a year charity. Other charities in our space, Wounded Warrior. I don't know if you've heard of Tunnel to Tower. You may have, but they're hundreds of millions of dollars. So the way I pitch my charity is you'll make you'll make a splash. If you donate $500 to one of those organizations, you're not even going to make a ripple in the water.
Mm-hmm.
But to $1 million charity, that's a huge impact. So
For
that's
sure.
smart that you do that. But you still have to make sure that the charities are doing right by your donations.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting world out there. So I spend a lot of time now with different charitable organizations, teaching them actually how to operate like a business, primarily because a lot of them don't realize how to operate like a business. And the other thing is, I here's something I just blew my mind with respect to charitable organizations. We brought a group of charities together. There's about 15 of them, and we just said, hey, like we see some things that you guys are doing wrong. And not from the perspective of doing it wrong, but it's like you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And we brought these guys together, and they were all in a very similar space. They all were similar size, and none of these people had ever met each other. It's like in the mortgage industry, in the real estate industry, I know all of my competitors, every single one of them. And I also know if I go into the United States right now, I know I can drop into any city in North America and I know 5 or 6 real estate agents or 5 or 6 mortgage people. We all know each other. We all share with each other. Sometimes we don't tell our competitors everything that we're doing. We don't always give them the secret sauce, but we'll share quite a bit of information. And these guys, they had no idea who each other were. They weren't sharing best practices. And it's like, you guys are raising money. And the fact that they saw themselves as competitors, and so there was 2 charities that come to mind on this. There was Branch Out Neurological Foundation and a charity called One Ball, which was a testicular cancer charity, which is like the best name ever for a testicular cancer charity.
So good.
And these guys knew of each other, but I'm like, why are you guys not talking? And they kind of had that mindset of, well, they're chasing dollars, we're chasing the same dollars. I'm like, no, no, no. The guy who's involved in the testicular cancer charity has nothing to do with the neurological charity. Like you aren't chasing the
Right,
same dollars.
right.
And it wasn't until I kind of opened their eyes to that I think at least they started talking, and I hope they started talking.
So they thought that they were chasing the same, if there was a
Hmm.
pool of $1,000 that people were going to direct to whatever charity. They thought they were competing for that 1,000 when in fact you need to compete in your own genre and you can still be friends.
Exactly. It's like two realtors going into a listing appointment and thinking that they're competing for the same finite amount of deals, and the reality is they aren't, because the people that resonate with realtor A are going to choose realtor A, the people that resonate with realtor B are going to choose realtor B. You're not really competing with each other, because with realtor B's audience, you didn't have a chance. You never had a chance. So why wouldn't you share information when you're so not similar, but you could share information and you could go and figure out how to get more clients with the group of clients that are actually going to resonate with you.
So besides collaboration, what other techniques did you have for them to not leave money on the table?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the thing that they were doing wrong the most. And that was not show. Oh, it's like this whole thing. It was not showing up with their existing donors on a regular basis. And it was, especially with companies and organizations, like we'd sponsor an event and then they wouldn't talk to us for 12 months. And then the event would come up and they'd be like, oh, hey, we're fundraising for this event that you guys sponsored last year. We're almost out of spots, but we've got a few spots left to fill. And they were calling us to fill the spots last instead of calling us first when we were the people who were supporting them the year before. It was like we were the low-hanging fruit, and it was almost insulting that they had found other charitable or other companies to support their charitable organization. They kind of slotted them in where we fit, and they were kind of ignoring us. They're making the exact same mistake that real estate and mortgage people and title people make all the time. It was like they're chasing the brand new instead of going to the low-hanging fruit, which was their in our case, it's existing clients, but in their case, it was existing sponsors and existing
Right,
donors. And
right,
it's
right.
like, and then on top of that, just calling when you need the money. It was like, well, hold on a second. Like if you were an actual business or real business and you're just calling people when you need to sell them something, how many people are going to pick up the phone for you, right? And for me, I look at the charitable world, I'm like, it would be so easy to take a small percentage of the money and just go, okay, yes, we spend this small percentage of the money on maintaining our relationships with our donors, but that money is well invested when we do it. And if we're staying in contact with them, every single quarter, we might actually get donations as a result of those
Right.
additional events if you just invite without the expectation of return.
So now do you tell them to touch them verbally or through email or how what's the best method? Because you can set up a CRM that you can touch every donor once a month, every other week. What's the best process in your mind?
Yeah, I think this is a problem in the online marketing space. And obviously, I've got two big YouTube channels with respect to the size of the audience. And I hang out with a lot of guys in the online marketing world, like the guy who created the online fitness world that was the predecessor to 6-minute abs and 4-minute abs and 30-second abs and all that stuff is an online marketing guy. I spent a lot of time with those guys. And I think this is a mistake that charities and businesses make is they talk about touch points. It's like, I'm just trying to create touch points for the sake of creating touch points. And really what it comes down to is touch points are about solidifying relationship. So if I'm a business, I'm going to look at my business, and this is, I'll give you the secret sauce of why our company is so successful, is we know we know exactly where our business comes from. We know who our supporters are. We know who the people who add the most to our bottom line are. And we don't treat them like they're just a cog in the wheel. We actually go out and we actively try to create relationships and develop relationships. And I shouldn't say we try to, we do. We have the most solid relationships with our biggest benefit or our biggest uh now I'm getting a charity and getting business mixed up, but
It's it's
our our
simple.
biggest our biggest sources for business and revenue, we have really solid relationships with. And we also have the people that maybe aren't the biggest yet, but are the easiest to deal with, the ones that are the easiest transactions, low friction. And we're building relationships with those people. And then we've got the people underneath where we're constantly trying to move people up into having a tighter, more solid relationship with them. And what that means is it's not about touch points, it's about understanding who they are and understanding at a deep level how you can connect with them and then doing things that are meaningful to them. So if I were a charitable organization, here's what I'd do. I would take a list of my top donors. I'd also make sure that I knew when a donor came to me, how they found out about me, so that I could kind of go down the line, because sometimes it's your biggest profit sources from a donor's perspective come from like one little tiny donor who maybe gives you a very small amount of money but tells everybody they know about you, and
Right.
they end up being the source. And then I would learn everything I possibly could about those people, whether it's a company or whether it's an individual, and I would start building the relationship out in such a way that they're no longer just a donor, but they're also a friend and a colleague
Right.
and somebody that I spend my time with, because chances are they're like-minded and aligned anyways, and then I'd build out from there.
So you would try and find out what they do in their leisure time, what they do in charity, what they do socially, just different aspects of their lives. And do you have a CRM with everyone you know's birthday,
Yeah, we do.
and
We
you
do.
reach out? That's great. You know what?
You know, I'll tell you what we do on our do for birthdays. We don't actually wish them a happy birthday. What we'll do is we'll call the spouse, especially if if it's a female's birthday, we'll call the husband 3 days before and say, "Hey, big birthday coming up. You got a plan?" And half the time they're like, "Oh shoot, I forgot it was the birthday
Right.
and I need to do something." So, you know, and birthdays are kind of one of those things where I hear from my insurance agent once a year, and it's literally a printed card that maybe he signed, I'm thinking it's probably a digital signature in a different color ink. But when we get that letter every single year, all it does is remind us how unattached to our insurance agent we are. So
Right.
you have to be careful with that stuff, because it can just as much be the worst
Well,
way of communicating with somebody as it can be the best.
right. No, that's great. You know what? That's why with so few employees, you're so big because
Mhm.
you listen. I'm the president of a networking group, and I'm constantly talking about know, like, trust. Until you trust, you can't really develop a strong relationship. But that word relationship is in there, and it's you know what? How many people in your company do the relationship building? Is it
All
just
of them.
you?
Nope.
All of
All of them. I don't even, I barely have relationships with anybody in the mortgage company anymore. I know our big players for sure. I'm pretty close with, but like I said, I've been doing YouTube for the last 4 years. I haven't done a mortgage personally in about 8 years. My
them.
team is just so good at building out the relationships, and we do things like we have an onboarding form that this is a funny story. So that we have an onboarding form that it asks them like what they like. It asks them their favorite restaurant, their favorite sports teams. And quite often what they think they're answering on those questions are the questions with respect to what happens if they get locked out of their application. So when somebody has a birthday and they're a really good client and we send them $100 gift card to their favorite restaurant, they're like, "Oh my God, that's my favorite restaurant. How do you know?" And
That's
it's like,
phenomenal.
"Because you told us," but they don't realize they told us. They totally forget.
Right.
So you can
That's
build
phenomenal.
stuff into a process, and then also my team is really good at, in just casual conversations, picking things up and making notes of it. And I'll tell you where this all came from. So are you familiar with the Fairmont hotel chain?
Oh yeah.
So in New York, it would be I want to call it the Plaza, but that's not right. The really the big hotel next to Central Park.
Oh, the my daughter just had a wedding there. The
Oh,
Plaza.
oh, so you're broke
Oh, the
then.
Pierre or the Plaza?
The Plaza. Yeah, it is the Plaza. Okay. So
Beautiful.
Fairmont hotel chains, they have right out my back door, about 45 minutes is the Banff Springs Hotel. And it's one of the nicest properties in the world. It overlooks the river. Like, it's absolutely gorgeous. And when my wife and I got together, we would go out there and we'd spend some time. We had status with them, and we had through our credit cards, and we could go there, and there's an Alberta resident rate. It was really cheap. So at the time we were staying there for like $149. Now it's like $700 a night.
Right.
And we'd go there. And the first time we went, we had this chocolate lab. Her name was Cash. Kind of ironic, two mortgage people who have a dog named Cash,
There you
right?
go.
And we get there, and they're like, "We're so sorry, sir, Mr. Matthias." They called me by my name right from the get-go. Not only did they call me by my name, but they knew how to say it properly, which nobody ever does. So they had actually made a note of how to say it properly
Did I
when
say
I
it
booked
properly?
the reservation.
I don't
Yep,
remember. Did I say it right?
I think so. I
Okay.
didn't. I it must
I'm gonna
you
have to
must
go
have, because
back.
I
I'm
didn't
gonna
pick
go
up on it
back and look at it.
for sure.
Yeah.
So we get there, and they're like, "Well, your room's not ready. Why don't you guys go to the Rundle Lounge, which is the lounge in the hotel that overlooks the river and the mountains, and have a couple of drinks on us?" And we're like, "Well, that'd be great, but we have the dog. We can't take her into the lounge." They're like, "Don't worry, we'll take care of the dog." So
Wow.
I thought what they meant by take care of the dog was they're going to put her in her kennel, and they were going to leave her in there. And we go and we have the drinks. About an hour, 2 hours later, they call us, "Your room's ready." We get up to the room. Our our bags are all laid out. Everything's nice. The dog is not in her kennel. She's laying on the bed, and she's exhausted. And like, I know when this dog is exhausted. She's a field trial lab. She's basically built for energy, and she's just like didn't even get up to come to the door. She was just tired. And I'm like, what the heck happened? So I went and asked, and they had basically spent 2 hours throwing the ball in they had this big luggage center because it's in the mountains. So people bring their ski gear, and that's where they store the ski gear. So they probably had like 50 yards worth of runway where they could throw a ball. They'd basically thrown a ball for her for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I get to, I take a look around the room, and not only that, they've put out two bowls for her. The one's already got water in it, and there's a card sitting in the food bowl, the food dish, and I open it up, and it says, "Dear Cash." They had taken her name off of her name tag, and they had written a letter stating, basically saying, "Hey, welcome to the Fairmont Banff Springs. Just so you know, please let your owners know that this is a national park. You have to be on the leash at all times. And we've given you doggy bags so that they can pick up your poop and everything else like that." And I was just like, wow. Oh, and by the way, here's a gourmet cookie from a local dog
Wow.
cookie shop. And I was like, wow. But this isn't
That's
even where the story gets like crazy, because we're just looking at this and going like, this is the last hotel we will ever stay at in Banff ever because of the dog experience. But 2 years later, we have our son call to book a room, and they say, "Are you celebrating anything?" And we just say, "Well, no, not really, but we just had a son, so we're just taking a couple days to get away from the house and just relax a little bit." Well, we get to the Banff Springs, and literally they had written a letter, "Dear Jackson." Jackson's our son's name. She had asked his name when I made the phone call to book the reservation, made a note of it, and they did the same thing. "Dear Jackson." They wrote a letter,
unbelievable.
and then they'd written a card to us as well. They had put a crib in the room without asking us if we needed a crib. They had put out the dog bowls for Cash. They still had her name on file. They did all of the things, and it was just so custom. The experience was so customized to us that it just blew our mind. And when we saw that, that was like the lightning bulb moment for the mortgage company, where we saw what they did, and we're like, we can layer this into a mortgage. And for
That's
a
phenomenal.
mortgage, it's a commodity. Like, come on, it's a commodity.
Of
We're just
course.
competing on experience. So we just took their experience piece and we layered it into our company, and that's what our team does now. That's why their relationships are so strong.
That is phenomenal.
Hmm.
That's great. I mean, we were I was thinking we might talk a little bit about mortgages, but the information and the what you've done, it's just really phenomenal. I mean, that's a hotel. Not only, it doesn't matter if you would ever go there again, but if anyone asks you, they're
Hmm.
going to go there.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. Someone's getting a mortgage, you got to use Mortgage 360 because the experience, listen to what they did for me.
Hmm.
No,
And it
that's
was so good. So forget like you kind of said, well, you might not ever go there again, but we went there constantly. And not only that, Fairmont has a program. It's called the Ovation Program. And to this day, we'll still send clients. We can buy a certificate from Fairmont that has breakfast included, everything else like that. And when we have a really great client who refers us another really great client, we'll actually send them to the Banff Springs for a night. So the
Wow.
amount, those two or three little things, it could have been $150 hotel room one time, but because of what they did, I've probably spent well over, it's definitely six figures. It could be pushing $250,000 over the last 10 years with the Fairmont hotel chain as a result of those
Right.
two little things they did.
That's
So,
it.
and that's how you build an amazing business. And by the way, it's how you build an amazing charity as well. You pay attention to things.
It's the only, so I stayed at the Fairmont in San Francisco, and the only thing I remember about that is that they had in the sand in the ashtrays in the lobby, they
Mhm.
imprinted their logo.
Yep.
I didn't have quite that experience, but that's unbelievable. And the
Yeah.
fact that you run your mortgage company in the same way is just a testament to why you're a phenomenal marketer. And we have to end it there, but yeah, I really enjoyed this and I really learned a lot. You're a great guy.
Well, thank you. You as well. Feelings
Thanks.
mutual.
No, that's great, and I hope that one day we'll have you back and learn even more, maybe even a little bit about where you think the economy's going. But
For
that's going to
sure.
have to be for another time.
Sounds good.
But
Appreciate it.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having me, Mike.
Hey, Nolan, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.